College life? Really? Am I able to do that? Be independent? Manage my life? My social life? What about sleeping and eating? My friends? Will I be able to see my friends all the time? I think I know how to do that.
My name is Muhammad, and I am studying at the University of Texas at Austin. In this movie, we will discuss the transition from high school life to the college life. As we know, college life is crucial to the development of an individual. It can make or break you. In this movie, we will discuss with some students about their experience in college life. As you are a UT student, and how many, and you have like 115 hours
Yes.
each week. So how do you manage your life between social and eating and studying? So as any student, you want to have a good GPA, so you want to focus on studying. So how do you want to manage these three things?
I would say a good way to manage a college career, a successful college career, would be by doing sacrifices. Sacrifices that basically are gonna lead you to the right direction. And sometimes you're gonna sacrifice sleep. Sometimes you're not gonna be able to eat all day. Sometimes you're not even gonna see your friends. Only and what's your goal in life? What's your goal while you're in college? Is to get a degree. And to get a degree, you need good grades. So it's a whole type of dilemma that people have to, work around. So the main thing here is for sacrifices. That's the key word here. Sometimes you have to sacrifice here and there, but ultimately it all pays off and everything will work out fine. Second advice would be or how you're going to reach that decision of as far as what to sacrifice. It would be prioritizing. And one way of knowing that is knowing when something is due, knowing when something is not due, knowing the importance of things for you to determine what to do.
Two main things that our friend Juan talked about from his own experience: sacrificing and prioritizing. Sacrificing, where you sacrifice by the thing that you want, but in fact you're choosing the more important thing. And prioritizing, where you rank your things to do regard to its duty.
Josh, how do you see your transition from high school life to college life?
For personal experience, it was a big transition for me. In elementary school, I actually skipped a grade, so I had been a year younger than everybody else going through college. So whereas most people are 18 or 19 starting college, I was only 17. Honestly, it was a little bit scary for me, not understanding what I was supposed to be doing in college. But I mean, once I faced the experiences and actually went to classes and understood what was going on, I mean, I faced the challenge head on. I had to adapt with what I was doing. I mean, I had to change my sleeping habits, my study habits, and my eating habits. I mean, I couldn't just do anything whenever I wanted. I had to learn how to manage my time, and I think that's one of the biggest things I've learned as far as my transition from high school to college.
Okay, in college life now, you taking 15 hours or 18 hours?
I'm taking 18 hours.
18 hours. So as I know, your major is pharmacy.
Yes, it's pharmacy.
So it's middle school. So it's really competitive school.
Yeah.
So and you work like a part-time RA in the Dubai Center.
Mhm.
I mean, how you manage your life? I mean, really hard to manage between social and work, especially because you have a job now, part-time job. And how do you manage it between studying? I mean, absolutely you want to have a high GPA.
It's tough. I mean, a lot of students here in the United States are going through the same thing I am, having to work and go to school. Many of us can't pay for college right out because of how expensive it is. But my second semester, I started working at HEB, and I learned how to manage my time and work. But, I mean, you can't always be working and always doing things that relate to school. You need to find some time to just relax and learn how to wind down, because if you keep working and studying consistently, you're going to build up all this stress, and it's eventually going to cause problems. So what I recommend, as far as what I did, is I learned how to, based on my work schedule and my school schedule, I fitted times every other week or every other weekend where I could just go out and play basketball, or go out and hang with my friends, or go eat with individuals who I knew could keep my mind off of work and school. So I was still doing what I could, but keeping myself relaxed at the same time.
How do you see the transition from high school to college life? How it's affect your life now?
The transition from high school to college was very hard for me, just because I went from being number one in my class, of a class of 72 and in a school of 300, to being this single person within like a body of 50,000. And it was just hard for me to come into school and realize that I actually had to study, and I actually had to read, and I actually had to do my work in order to pass, rather than just talk to the teacher and be friends with them. And I guess it was also hard for me to come in not knowing anybody, because I came from such a small school and nobody else came from my school, and that was probably the hardest thing.
And what's your major?
I'm communications of sciences and disorders, so speech pathology stuff.
Okay. How do you manage the studying with the social life and eating habit or sleeping?
I have to be honest, I'm still learning, because it's totally different from high school. I mean, like I said, I never studied ever, and now I actually have to study to pass a test, so I'll set aside at least 3 hours or so every 2 or 3 days to study for everything, and then I'll still keep a social life. Like, I usually go out every weekend, but I don't go out every day of the weekend, so it'll be like I'll go out on Friday, but then I'll study Saturday and Sunday, or I'll go out on Saturday and study Friday and Sunday, and that's just how I started to manage my time.
Do you think the homework or the assignment what the professor gave it to you it really affect your life in college? I mean, you put you under pressure?
Not with this major so much. When I was a chemistry major last semester, it was a lot tougher, because there's just so much required of you for that major, and now that I know people say the communication school is easy, and I mean, it's a lot less work, but you still have to put forth effort into it, and I still try to do my best in all my schools.
The students who started a new college life faced some problems from being responsible of every single thing in their life. Also, transferring from a small communities to a big communities makes problems for the student who want to be one of the best students in the university, because of the amount of the students in the university. Another point, the student who is studying away from home faced a problem that is he have to make a new lifestyle and new social life and change everything in his life.
First of all, Dr. Lazy, we will thank you about your help in this interview. We want to ask you about how do you see the transition from high school life to college life?
I think that first year students really have a big challenge, and a lot of that challenge comes from the challenge of learning to regulate themselves. You know, before there were people to tell them to go to bed, there were people to tell them to eat, to study, and now all of a sudden they're all on their own. And I think that that is a big challenge for them. And so I think that they often underestimate the importance of sleep, especially, college students, I hear it all the time, and I struggle with this myself. They pull all-nighters, and, they think, studying is so important, I have to do this, as opposed to sort of regulating their time and making sure that they're feeding their brains, because sleep is brain food. And without that, we don't regenerate. So I think that's a huge, that regulation of self is really, really important. Then in addition to that, in terms of the regulation, there is the balance between their social life and their, their studies. And I think people can err in two different ways. Some people are all about social, and they do so much social that their studies suffer, and they don't realize that college is going to be a different kind of studying, but that it's much more difficult. They were the top students in their classes at home, and so now all of a sudden they're in with everybody as a top student, so the difficulty gets higher. And so, so some people err on too much social, whereas other people err on too much study. And then about October of their first year, they burn out because they weren't meeting people and making friends. So it's all about a balance of self-care, like exercise, as well as eating correctly, as well as sleeping. So balancing your self-care and your social growth and development, as well as your academic growth and development.
Let's talk about sleeping habits. So,
Certainly.
like, when we look like in science, they should talk about the male and the female. The adult people should sleep maximum 8 hours or 6 hours. And actually, in the life here in the college life, if I am engineering, the maximum 5 hours or 6 hours. I go bed at like 3 a.m. My class starts 7, so 4 hours, for example. So, what do you think about sleeping? I mean, it's really important to get a good grade. So, what's your recommendation or advice to balance the sleeping? I mean,
right. Well, for first-year students, it's pretty interesting because they're still teenagers.
Yeah.
Okay, and we know that teenagers don't need 8 hours; they need 9 or 10 hours. So they really still need their sleep. They like to go to bed late, and they like to
wake up late.
Right. And so, if they can arrange their schedule for later classes, I think that's helpful. But there's a myth that if I stay up all night, I'm going to do better on this test, and that is clearly a myth, because what we know from studies of people who are driving when they haven't been sleeping, research has shown that a driver who went a whole night without sleep drives worse than somebody who has had too much to drink. That is at the legal level. So a person who is drunk and driving is better in response time than a person who is sleepless and driving. So now let's take this to the classroom. Okay, so
people who are drunk.
Right.
Yeah.
So, the fact of it, if you think that's a great way to think about it, that if I stay up all night and study for this test, I'm going to do worse on this test than somebody who's drunk on this test. It's a very clear way to think about it. And so the idea that if you can study as you go, like if you're going to make note cards for your materials, you start doing it the first time you read a chapter or after a lecture, and then you continually study rather than putting yourself in a crisis.
Can you give us in order what is more important? Is it sleeping or social life or food or studying? That will help most the students to get like what they are looking for, a high GPA and like a great life.
I would say your building blocks of sleep and eating and exercise. And also, I don't want to overlook the idea of spirituality, because that's also self-care, whatever their spiritual beliefs are. So if you can balance your life on that, you have this nice foundation for building a balance between your academic and social life, and so academics I think would be the second layer, and then social life would be the third. That the most important is that physical foundation.
Even though college at a big university like the University of Texas at Austin may be one of the most difficult steps to take in life, it can also be one of the most rewarding. Individuals who decide to take this challenge possess a special drive, a drive to better themselves and the world around them. And those who do take on this challenge will ultimately have the best experience of their life doing so. So don't shy away from college, and if you're lucky enough to get into the University of Texas, you'll be one of the few who changes the world.